Torpedoes away. And a great unseen danger. February 19, 2020 by Anna von Reitz. My Shinola Sensor has been driving me crazy the last few days as it has been reacting to the news coming out of China. I have been scanning through every published medical and news report I can lay hands on, and frankly, the results don't add up. Certain reports are consistent with infectious disease symptoms and results, so, yes, there does seem to be an infectious disease component, but then, turn around, and the next 10 reports make no sense at all if this outbreak is caused by a biological vector. And I do mean no correlation, none, zero, zip, nada. What those aberrant findings indicate is a non-biological source of the malady, electromagnetic radiation sickness, coupled with poor air quality in China and reduced atmospheric oxygen levels. Those who have been following along with recent posts have become familiar with research going back more than a century compiled and published by Arthur Furstenberg in his book, The Invisible Rainbow, and brought forward by Robert David Steele. Put simply, the raw transmissions of our power plants, electrical grid, radio transmitters, and now, microwave towers, have known health problems associated with them. Most particularly, they interfere with porphyrins, which are enzymes needed to build hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is the molecule that carries oxygen in our bloodstream, so this whole metabolic system is impacted, and our cells and tissues are not able to access and use oxygen efficiently. There are other known effects, too, such as thinning of our blood, reducing its oxygen-carrying capacity at the same time that it reduces our ability to coagulate blood. Outrageously, these effects of unrestricted M transmissions have been known in some circles for over a century, but have been pooh-poohed and obscured in favor of those benefiting financially by not having to modulate electrical outputs, power companies, and from treating the anoxia-caused diseases that predictably result from long-term exposure to raw M fields, coronary disease, diabetes, and cancer. Big Pharma, AMA, medical establishment. The resulting interference with our ability to access and use oxygen, blood thinning effect, serious air pollution in China, and overall reduction in atmospheric oxygen can then create a domino effect resulting in symptoms that mirror hemorrhagic fever. Viewed against that background, and in view of the 5G rollout in Wuhan just prior to this, South Korea's success with treating coronavirus with simple oxygen therapy makes total sense. More oxygen offsets the effect of damaged hemoglobin and inefficient energy transfer metabolism. There are still more lessons to be learned from the Spanish influenza epidemic that hit in 1918, too, that may be crucial to victims and would be victims today. One of our dauntless researchers uncovered otherwise buried information that involved Bayer, and its most famous product, Bayer aspirin. Bayer aspirin was big news in 1918 and it was initially prescribed in literally lethal doses during the Spanish flu epidemic. I quote, "In 1918, the Bayer Corp was pushing aspirin, and in dosages far exceeding now known safe levels. Both the Army and Navy mandated these known toxic doses for their service members, and civilians were also encouraged to do the same. Aspirin in such high doses is a hemolytic toxin, similar to rat poison. Like warfarin, in such lethal levels, death can occur in a matter of hours." The two categories of death seen in the pandemic were upper respiratory edema, consistent with bacterial pneumonia, and a hemorrhagic condition with rapid onset and nearly 95% mortality. The two categories could not have been more different, and would be consistent with both EMF-induced immune suppression and opportunistic bacterial infection, and a second cohort, mostly young, string, otherwise healthy men and women showing classic signs and symptoms of salicylate poisoning. Unquote. Bayer has just acquired Monsanto, the chief proponent and patent holder for nano-assisted GMO transfer agent technology. Is history repeating itself? I was recently horrified when a friend on blood thinners hurt his leg and innocently took ibuprofen and turned a banged-up shin into a near crisis. None of his doctors ever told him to avoid ibuprofen and aspirin and to restrict acetaminophen, and we forget that common pain killers and fever reducers are blood thinners. Both ibuprofen and aspirin can cause hemorrhage and symptoms that look like hemorrhagic fever. Taken in excess or in tandem with other unperceived blood-thinning factors, these common, cheap, taken for granted, over-the-counter drugs have the potential to kill. During the Spanish influenza they helped to kill millions. Coupled with the unseen blood-thinning effects of intense M radiation fields provided by active 5G networks, these medicine cabinet standbys could easily become deadly in normal dosage ranges, and what else would people suffering from high fever reach for? Additionally, anyone who was on blood-thinning medication for any chronic condition, including most heart patients, would be at greatly increased risk. So, how about this scenario, which neatly explains the entire gamut of information coming out of China? A new 5G grid is rolled out in Wuhan, China, and unseen, begins to impact the blood of the Chinese people in range, thinning their blood to dangerous levels and crippling their ability to access and use oxygen at the cellular level, oxygen that is already depleted in the atmosphere. Then, a GMO-style nanobot transfer agent is used to introduce a virus known to cause high fever. The victims and doctors reach for the common fever-reducing drugs and voila, the symptoms of a fatal hemorrhagic fever present themselves within hours. Everyone thinks it's a new super-deadly biotech weapon and that it is carried by a virus which serves well enough to tank China's exports and economy and the new China-Trump trade deal, but all the virus does is cause a relatively bad fever. Technically, it's not deadly at all, which keeps the perpetrators from being prosecuted for war crimes. It's actually the other factors, the unappreciated biological effects of 5G and the unthinking use of blood thinners as fever reducers that makes the coronavirus deadly. And that, my friends, is the only scenario in all this data that presents itself as being both likely and true. Bayer has prior experience killing people via pandemic interactions. Bayer recently acquired Monsanto, the patent holder for GMO transfer agent technology that could be used to implant the fever-causing virus. Bayer has been taking it in the shorts as Chinese companies have taken over increasingly larger and larger shares of pharmaceuticals production away from American and European manufacturers. Time to look for dots, people. We have motive and we have means, and it is pointing right at Bayer, Monsanto. Is there a DoD or NIH connection? A connection to Charles Lieber? Harvard? It's no secret that there are certain elements embedded in all these communities that hate China for political and financial reasons, and no doubt whatsoever that some of those same parties hated the China-Trump trade deal and would wish to dismantle it by any means possible. Getting the Chinese to, in effect, kill themselves, and convince everyone that it's the result of a pandemic, would appeal to the sense of logic and humor, such as it is common among such persons. It's the same rationale that foists mortgages off onto unsuspecting people, disguised as home loans. It's the same that foists U.S. citizenship off onto Americans.